Jean-Michel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. I want to talk about Oxygène 3 in just a bit, but first I want to go back to that very first record back in 1976. If you don't know this record, it's a really important album in the history of electronic music, and unlike most important albums, it sold a lot of copies, you know? There's usually albums that are deemed important means, oh yeah, we sold 300, but it was important. Not only was this important, but it sold over 50.
I sold 300 of the previous one.
Yeah, over 15 million copies. Why do you think that album resonated so much with audiences back then?
I don't know. I don't really know, because actually it has been firstly it has been rejected by almost all record companies, saying what this music is all about. There is no drummer, no singer, and on top of it, he's French. So and then a small label took it, and with the success you just described. And I think it's, things are happening because sometimes you do something which happen to be in phase with society, with what people want to listen to, probably linked to a certain idea of the future, also linked with space, and this kind of at that time, this kind of hope you had where the future was cool, where the future, the idea, the vision of the future was cool. But after the year 2000, cars would fly, and the social and education system would be perfect.
Yeah,
would be disappointed after 2000.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't stick around. I was going to say that because 1976, so much was happening. Disco was peaking, but punk was breaking. Punk was breaking at the same time, and then this album sells 50 million copies. What do you think it was about 76? What was going on then?
I think that. It's always the same thing. When you have very big trends happening, something like a kind of UFO happening, something like a totally different happening, suddenly creates a kind of shock, probably, and also it's also due to the fact that electronic music is not. I've always been convinced it's not a genre like punk, rock, or hip hop. It's something else. It's
what do you mean?
It's not. It means that I mean by this that it's not only a genre of music. It's a different way of approaching music composition by doing music not only with notes based on solfeggio, but with sounds and. I mean, grabbing a microphone, going outside, recording the sound of the wind, of the rain, of the street, and making music with it was totally different, a totally different approach. And I've always been convinced that one day or another it would become the major way, or the major genre then of not only of music but of music composition.
Were you surprised at the time it did so well? Was that a shock to you?
Absolutely, I think it was a total shock, and I couldn't believe it until one day I was working with my publisher in the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and we saw in a record shop Elton John going out from the record store with 10 copies of Oxygene. And I remember that my publisher said, I think it's going to be a hit.
Well, it's been 40 years since that hit. It's been 40 years since you first released Oxygène. You're celebrating the moment with this new record, Oxygène 3. This is not the first time you've revisited the themes on that first record. You did it in 97 with Oxygène 7. But what were you hoping Oxygène 3 might add to the legacy of that first record?
Okay, when I first did Oxygène for me was not like a series of songs with titles. Actually, Oxygène is the name of the album with part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like chapters of a book.
It's like a novel, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then in those days, I said to myself, it could be cool to in my life to write some sequels of that, because I always love sequels in literature, in movies, in obviously TV, but it doesn't really exist in music. And I said it could be, taking the same actors or the same sounds or the same instruments and just putting them with a different script or different scenario. So in a sense, Oxygène 3 is season 3 of Oxygène.
Let's take a listen to a little bit of it. This is Jean-Michel Jarre with a song called Part 17, Part 17 of his latest album, Oxygène, Toi. That's a little bit of part 17, partie 7 off of Oxygène 3 or Oxygène 3, the latest album from my guest, pioneering electronic musician Jean-Michel Jarre. So did you listen back to when you were composing the sequel, the sequel to Oxygène, Oxygène 3, did you listen to the old record? Did you listen to the first record?
No, I know. I actually, what happened is actually I was involved in this massive project I released just before Oxygène 3 called Electronica, based on the collaboration with lots of different artists linked directly or indirectly to the electronic music scene. And I've traveled a lot, working with lots of different people, lots of different countries, and I did during this period a track. This track was not fitting with the project I was working on, and I said that would be the beginning of maybe another Oxygène.
But why not go back to the first record? I mean, if this is a sequel to the first record, why not go back? Why were you? Was it intentionally you weren't listening to it?
Actually, yes, because actually when after this massive production I've done, I said it could be fun for me first to go back to what I've done at the beginning of my career, where I did the first Oxygène in 6 weeks with very minimalist equipment. And I said, okay, I'm going to lock myself up in the studio for 6 weeks, and just trying to get the same kind of approach. Like I did the first one on 8 tracks, 8-track tape recorder. So I said, okay, I'm not going to use more than 8 sounds at the same time, and so on and so forth.
So I was going to ask about that, because the 6 weeks, the first one, and 6 weeks the new one. So that was intentional. That was the first question I had, really.
Yes, rather than listening to it, rather than going back to if it's possible, the same kind of mood. And I say I'm not going necessarily to use exactly the same kind of instrument, because if I was doing the first one in 2017 and 2016, I would use something else, the instruments of my time. What I've done, actually, I mixed both, and the first one was quite sunny and dark, I would say, with the visual, the graphics, with the skull inside the earth and all that. You had that, and I did also the first one in vinyl days, where unconsciously we were thinking about side 1, side 2, 20 minutes on each side, etc. And I did the same. I did the same thing almost unconsciously. I would say that Oxygène 3 has 2 sides, vinyl like a vinyl. One side being more dark and abstract, and the other side being more probably more sunny or more musical, more melodic.
This is something that Miles Davis has talked about, and this is and I know you're a fan of Miles Davis, and I know you listen to Sketches of Spain a lot in making this record. And I got the crazy honor one time of speaking to Herbie Hancock about this, which is the idea when you make very free music, like you do and like they do, sometimes putting constraints on how you make your music, whether it's I want to make this in 6 weeks or I want to make this using this particular technology, can actually add to your music. Do you find?
Absolutely. I think that limitations are the key.
What do you mean?
For creation limits. I mean, for instance, I did the first one with the first Oxygène with very limited equipment, because very few electronic equipment was existing at that time, and also it was very expensive. So I was very limited for both reasons.
It was like going to the moon, that first record you made.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But we're going to the moon with an aeroplane.
Yeah.
You know? and then. And these days, technology would probably make us believe all that there is no limit anymore. I mean, since the beginning of this conversation, probably 1,000 softwares have been released in the market, and they will be probably obsolete by tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
and then if the danger, the beauty is actually you have no limits in your choice, but the absolute risk and the absolute goal you have not to forget is, for a young beginner, that would be my only advice. It would be create your own limits, because it's between this framework that you can be yourself.
Right.
And actually, it's very interesting. If you talk about Miles Davis was not the kind of virtuoso playing, able to play 1,000 notes in 1 second. Then because he was not like this. His talent and his genius was somewhere else. So he suddenly went to get, for instance, in his life, playing less and less notes, because it was the way he was perceiving music. And then he used his own limits to make something absolutely unique, what was his style.
Yeah, he would say that the notes that you don't play are as important, if not way more important, than the notes you do play. Do you relate to that?
I could not agree more. I would mention also something else. In China, people are considering that the silence between notes are more important than the notes themselves.
Yeah,
it's the same kind of.
Well, yeah, Mozart knew that. I mean, it's a beautiful. This is really fun to talk to you. I want to play another track from Oxygène 3. This is part 20 on cue. That's a really incredible piece of music. That's Jean-Michel Jarre, by the way. It's part 20 from his new album, Oxygene 3. Even just listening to those 20, 30 seconds of it, you get so impacted by it. Just tell people listening to this a little bit about that piece of music.
It's interesting listening to it, and I was makes me think about kind of Alien or something. But it's very very interesting what happened with through this Oxygene 3. Recording. It was I did it also within very difficult times. We've been in my country, in France, with all these horrible terrorist acts we've been victims of, like you in Canada, but in France it has been particularly hard the past 2 years. And almost unconsciously, I did this. I mean, this album, Oxygene 3, has 7 parts. 7 parts, yes. And then between each part, you have these kind of chaotic moments, the moments we just heard about. And these parts are not related to the previous one, or these sections are not related to the previous part or the next or the following one. And it's like if I wanted to express the fact that you go out, and at the corner of the street you can meet the love of your life, or you can die because of you've been trapped into the terrorist act. This kind of totally unexpected chaos that can come to you anytime, and it's something that I think I've been quite impressed by. I did some of the music of my previous album, and I was in studio when the Bataclan.
You were in studio making music when the attack on the Bataclan happened.
Yeah, and I've been really shocked by that, because I ignored what happened. And when I was working with one of my friends called Christophe, a very good French singer and very interesting artist, and we just ignored that because we were isolated. And when I went back home, I realized that it was like we were in war. We never experienced war in our generations. I mean, our parents, yes, did, but not us. And to be in the middle of Paris, no noise, just police cars everywhere, no lights on the cars, and total silence. It was like a kind of blitz, kind of, it's like if the planet or the Earth just stopped in Paris that night. And that really impressed me. And I think that some of these feelings are almost unconsciously inside in this Oxygene 3 album.
Because it's chaotic. It can be chaotic. It can be a dissident,
Yeah, exactly.
not unlike life itself. It's a really, I mean, I think even just, you can hear when we were listening to it then, you could feel the table rattle as you got to some of those frequencies. Yeah. I think that electronic music has the ability through manipulating frequencies to affect us physically in a way that a lot of other music can't.
Yes, I always consider my job in a very specific way. My job is actually to make the air vibrating.
Oh, okay.
It's very humble, very invisible, because it's and depending on the way you are making the air vibrating, you can create boredom. You can create the fact that you want to move your body until the end of the night.
And you can actually make someone's body feel differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just by moving air in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. Is that why you've always put such an emphasis on live shows? I would say more than a lot of electronic performers.
Probably. I think also it's because I've been really involved with paintings and visual arts when I was a student. I almost hesitated becoming a musician or a visual art artist, I would say, rather than a painter.
What do you get out of that? What do you get out of standing on stage? I mean, there's a 3.5 million people came to see you at one point. You hold one of the records for the largest outdoor concerts. 3.5 million people. I can't even understand. I can't even think about that many people in a room. Like, what does that feel like to stand up on stage in front of that many people and play your music?
It's strange because it was in Moscow. What you are referring
in Moscow.
at it, and I remember that when they announced the concert, the mayor of Moscow said we are doing this concert and we are expecting 30,000 people, and more than 3 million people came along, and I never exactly understood why. It happened a few times in my life. And I think that beyond myself, I think it's because also it's probably due to the fact that people want to experiment and to experience things in a different way. Partly these days where we think we are connected to the world through our screens, our smartphones, our computers, and actually we don't talk to our neighbor next door. I mean, we need somehow to gather shoulder against shoulder for something that's not going to happen next Saturday. That's going to happen just like the real one-off.
But how does that feel for you, just as a human, walking out on stage and seeing that mass of people in front of you? Are you terrified? Are you...
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scare for me is the same if you have 200 people in a room or 3 million people, because actually I think that the performance on stage is a very strange chemistry, very mysterious chemistry between two entities, the stage and the audience. Mm-hmm. And whatever the scale of the audience, this chemistry works or doesn't. We could talk forever about this, but I've just had an example. You were mentioning this concert in Moscow. I did this concert the night of the funeral of Princess Diana. Mm-hmm. And I was quite close to Princess Diana. She was... she was quite a big fan. She went to one of my concerts in London, and I was quite on stage. I suddenly thought about her, and I just dedicated one song she loved that I've done, "Souvenir of China," that she to her. And in Moscow on Saturday night, lots of vodka is going on, so it was real chaos all over the city. And suddenly I said I would like to dedicate this next song to my friend Princess Diana, and suddenly the whole city stopped. Not one noise, nothing, and they just use their lighters and to make lights, and it was so moving. First of all, I mean, in those days, I mean, Moscow was quite remote from London and from England, mm-hmm. And so the power of this young woman was extraordinary. But actually, what I mean by this is actually suddenly, I couldn't even play after that. We were all. It was a very emotional moment, mm-hmm. and I mean by this that again. Suddenly, these 3 million people, it was like family. It was like just one audience in a little theater. It's fantastic. The communion, the spirit, the community spirit was very, very high, very strong.
It's incredible. Do you still listen to electronic music? Do you listen to new electronic music now?
Yes, a lot, because I have lots of contacts, lots of friends in the DJ scene, in the new electronic music scene, and actually that was what gave me the desire to do this Electronica project just released before Oxygene 3.
The Electronica project,
Yes, and I mean, collaborating with people who are linked directly or indirectly to electronic music, whatever the generation, from M83, Gesaffelstein, or Air, Moby, to John Carpenter or Tangerine Dream.
Well, I wanted to put you on the spot a little bit because it's not every day I get to speak to someone at your level. Can you give me your top 3 favorite electronic musicians of all time?
Of all time? Mm-hmm. It's always difficult because I don't think I have 3. I have probably 100. But I would say that for me, in a very, I think that I wouldn't say favorite because I think it's not like sports. I don't like this kind of.
We shouldn't be ranking
hierarchy.
music against.
But actually, people who have been a source of inspiration and very important, I would say Walter Wendy Carlos. Mm-hmm. It's not 2, but 1. And I consider that the soundtrack she made for Clockwork Orange is probably one of the most important thing in my life as a musician. I think that what David Byrne and Brian Eno did for My Life in the Bush of Ghosts is also something very. It's a foundation of something. I did Zuluk at the same time, and lots of people are thinking that those two albums, based on sampling for the first time, are quite close. But anyway, I'm not talking about one of my albums. You asked me for 3, and I would say that I don't know, probably the first Chemical Brothers, maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it's a later record.
Yeah.
So you're still, I mean, people of your caliber and people who have released albums, in the late 70s, it's not.
When you say latter, yes, Chemical Brothers is always they're always very adults because if I could tell you about much younger also people who have been, for example, the first, and I invite our listeners to listen to Fog Buttons, for instance, because they are not a very very known band mm-hmm. from the UK. Mm-hmm. But the first time I heard their music, I said, this is something I never heard before. And they are 25 or 28.
But it's not uncommon for artists that are, by the way, you look great. I don't know how you're doing this.
You.
I have no idea. I want whatever your secret is. I want that secret. Whatever cream or serum you're using, I want to figure this out right
because
now.
I'm a vampire. Yeah, they call me Dracula on stage.
That must be it. But a lot of artists who started making music when you did, they can find themselves trapped in a bubble of nostalgia that they only like artists from about 10 years before them and about 10 years after them. Why do you think you keep searching for new music?
I don't know. I always thought that for me, music is like is from first of all an addiction, and also this kind of strange, quite uncomfortable obsession by trying to get the ideal piece of music that you would like to achieve. And each time, you think after every album for me, it's a strange mix between. Hope and frustration. The frustration that what I've done is not exactly what I wanted to achieve, and the hope that next time it will be better or less worse or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like a soap, like a mirage in the desert where you try to say, okay, I'm going to get this right, and as long as you're not happy, you go on. and I think that I would probably go on forever because I want to achieve it.
Well, that leads me to my last question, because you've said that artists have a mixture of frustration and hope when it comes to the things that they create. Frustration that they could have done a better job, and hope that they'll do it better next time. I'm wondering, with the release of this album, Oxygene 3, which you said is a sequel in so many ways and a continuation of the legacy that you started in 1976. How are you feeling about this legacy right now?
It's strange because more than ever, I just did a collaboration with Gorillaz, with Damon Albarn in the last Gorillaz album. And I realized during this, Damon came to my studio and we had a really good time. And I said it's strange because what I feel today is electronic music has in a sense, has a legacy, and probably I'm part of this, mm-hmm. But has a family and has a future. And this is still this kind of 3 very fundamental elements, which are quite unique in the history of music, that you have already a history, but there is this kind of family spirit you can find in festivals, you can find everywhere, and there is also a future, not only because it's going to develop and so on and so forth, but also because it's also linked to a certain idea, a certain vision of future. I think, as we said at this beginning of the beginning of this conversation, I mean, when I started Oxygene, it was with this kind of hope for the future, vision, probably also quite innocent, naive vision of the future we had in the 60s or the 70s.
Yeah.
And we lost that in the year 2000s. And I think it's coming back. It's coming back in literature. It's coming back in movies. When you see, I mean, when you watch movies such as Interstellar, and suddenly people in technology think people like Elon Musk, and you feel that there is now a time there where we want to explore space. And exploring space is not only technological; it's also spiritual, and also metaphysical.
Yeah,
also,
there's an innate hope in that you want to explore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that electronic music is the soundtrack of what we're talking about.
Jean-Michel Jarre, I can't begin to tell you how much fun this was to talk to you today.
The same. Thank you.
Jean-Michel Jarre is an electronic musician and composer and icon. His latest album is called Oxygène 3, Oxygène 3, and it's available now. Jean-Michel Jarre joined me in the Q studio.